Should we do what? Sorry?
Should we check to see if that person has found parking or if they're in the elevator?
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the Slack. I haven't gotten a notification yet.
Oh.
I generally get notified if I see things in the thread as well. So I'll keep an eye on that. Let me share my screen too. So last month, if you were here, and I know Mike, you were here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Last month's meetup was a little atypical because the coding challenges for May were too difficult. I didn't realize how difficult they were. The easy was more like a medium. The medium was more like an insanely difficult one. And the hard one would have been solved in the process of creating the medium one. So I kind of just screwed up, didn't really realize what was involved. For those of you who weren't here, we spent the last few months kind of building up towards the Sudoku solver and generator. So last month was basically create a Sudoku generator. We had already done the solver. Problem is that in order to generate, you actually have to solve it. You have to do this backtracking algorithm because it wasn't as simple as I thought. I thought it was as simple as creating a random matrix of digits, but you can't. And apparently it's like, it's really difficult. So basically last month we spent, Drew and the rest of the people here spent the entire time just talking about this problem. I went through and watched a recording. A guy named Doug actually solved it. And he hasn't been coming for the last 3 or 4 months, but he did it in his own time at one point. And he did it correctly. He solved this problem because he actually created a Sudoku solver in Slash way back a long time ago. So if you want to check out his, I'll find a link and I'll put it in the JavaScript channel at some point. So because of that, I also didn't have time to create new problems for this month. So we don't have any problems to discuss, but I will introduce next month. So it's another game. This time it's tic-tac-toe. So this one, a lot of what happened last time, it just kind of got into heavy algorithms. So I'm going to try and not make it algorithm heavy and just kind of explore different ways of doing things in JavaScript instead this time. So the first easy problem is just write a function that takes an array of 9 characters, where those characters give the definition of the board. So you can define a tic-tac-toe board with the numbers 1 through 9 there. If there's a digit, that means it's not been taken yet. If it's an X or an O, that means that spot's been taken. So the first one is just take that array and print this board out. Console log that. The second one is this play function that if you give it a board, if you give it which player, X or O, and then you give it the position 1 through 9, it will return a new board with that position marked. And then if that spot's already been taken, then don't mark that spot. Just return back the board that you had. And then the hard problem is write a function that determines who won the game given a board. If the player has already won the game, actually I worded that a little weird, but if a player has won the game, return X or O depending on who won. If the game is tied, return tie. If no one has won yet, there's still more to be played, then return undefined. So I did write some tests for the last 2. You can run those. The first one I did not write any tests for because it's logging things to the console, so can't really run a test for that. Any questions about any problems?
You didn't want to do a 2-dimensional array?
We could do a 2-dimensional array. I figured it's nice that there's exactly 9 spots, and the digits 1 through 9 fit in there really nicely.
Yeah.
So the way I'm thinking about this, I'll kind of tell you my thought process going forward. The goal is to actually make a playable game. And so you can actually do this in your console. Okay, Drew's here in the elevator. Mike, you got it for me? Thanks. And so in order to do that, my idea would be you print the board out. You can either say this is a player that I'm going to play as, or you can alternate and say player 1 you play now, player 2 you play now. and you just type a digit 1 through 9, and you press enter, and then it marks that spot on the board. So the neat thing about this one, a lot of what we've been talking about, or my slant on how we talk about JavaScript lately, has been very functional approach. And it's not exactly clear sometimes how to do something that requires managing state in a functional paradigm. So this one, because it's a game that requires back and forth, requires managing state on top of that. Hey, how's it going? I'm Caleb. Vu?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome. It's your first time here? Great. We're just talking about some coding problems for the next month. So typically we cover previous month's coding camp problems and introduce next month's one, and then we go into the topic. So that's the reason why I did the digits 1 through 9. I know you were out, but the idea is that if you just type number 1 through 9, then you can mark I want to play that place in there when you actually play the game. So,
Cool.
Just keeping it a little simple, and there's only 9. So, instead of having to say like A1, B2 or something like that. Yeah. Keep it simple. Any other questions about coding challenges? Okay, we'll cover this next month then. And we'll jump right into today's topic. This one's a really fun one. For those of you who came, I think it was 4 months ago at this point. And we covered a few things. We started with solid.js, and then we looked at Vue actually. We looked at Svelte. Did we look at Svelte? I don't remember. I lost track of what we covered. Yeah, we covered Svelte.
We did.
We did do Svelte.
Yeah. The first one I was here.
And then we did RxJS as well. But then we also took a look at, we've seen a few different frameworks. I didn't cover React yet. But we wanted to see how reactivity works. In other words, in Vue, when you change your data, are you familiar? You guys have experience with Vue or React or some framework like that?
Yes, I work with Angular.
Angular, okay. So they're all similar, but essentially like you change the data part and it re-renders some part of the DOM, right? And so the question is like, how do you do that? How do you react to changes in your data? And so 3 months ago or 4 months ago, we covered how you would actually write your own framework like Vue using proxies. And so we're going to cover more about what proxies can do here in a second. We didn't get very far with the observability bit. And one thing I wanted to point out is that's not how React works. So Vue uses proxies for reactivity. React does not. React uses a recursive loop. And I actually have no idea how that works. So if anyone does know, I don't think they use proxies though. If I'm not mistaken, so proxies is a relatively new feature. It's an ES6 feature. It's supported in most major browsers. It's not supported in IE, any version of IE, including the most recent one that's now not supported anyway. There is a polyfill for some of the proxy, in particular getters and setters, which is pretty much all you need for observability. But for that reason, I don't think Vue supports IE. I could be wrong about that. But because they use proxies, they may not be IE compatible. So just a thing to keep in mind. So proxies, has anyone heard of JavaScript proxies before? Are you familiar with a proxy in general, the concept of a proxy? It's basically just kind of like you're a messenger almost. You're taking what you were given and you just kind of pass it off to the next one. So the key thing there is transparency, right? You don't want to change the things that you were given. So proxies provide transparent observability. And I'm going to comment out this so that we'll get to it as we go along. Start with this top part here. I'm just requiring these helpers in here. These are just some helper functions to make the layer parts a little easier. I've got a logger. There's a reason why I'm not just using console log. I'll show you a little bit later. This is the zip width, which takes 2 arrays and then kind of combines the elements from each array together using the function that you give it. And it uses the smaller of the arrays because there's not enough elements if you try and use all one. This is a shuffle, which just shuffles through, and I actually stole this from the coding challenges from May, where you're supposed to create a random row for the Sudoku. I just stole that code. There's probably better ways of doing this, but and then I'm just exporting all of those. So if I have an array here and then I wrap it in a new proxy, we'll get to what this object is later. And then I log this out. So you can see that if I log the array in the proxy, they both look exactly the same. If I log out type of array and type of proxy, they both are objects. And if I get the property names of that array and that proxy, they're both exactly the same. So it's completely transparent. It didn't really add anything to it. It almost looks like it's still just the original array. But what this allows you to do is add in interceptors. And so the first thing that you pass the proxy is the object that you want to wrap around. And the second thing you pass it is another object with methods that are called certain things, and those things will get invoked when certain actions happen. So for observability, we want to know when a thing was set, when we've changed the value of some property on that object. So on update here just takes an object and we'll call back. The set function takes target prop and value. There's also something, we won't cover it today, but there's something called the reflect. It's another ES6 feature, and it allows for introspection of your code. And they go hand in hand. Every single method that you can add as a handler for your proxy is also a method on reflect. You don't have to use reflect.set here. You can instead, so in this case, well, let me run it and show you first what's going to happen. So here I have my on update that says when I set a property, I'm going to take the value and I'm going to pass it to the callback that you give me. And then I'm going to set the value. So here I say on update, when I update this person, I want to log it. And so I have person, that last name, Clooney is actually me setting it. And so let's run this now. You can see that that got ran there. So what happened was, let's actually do something else here. Let's log, I have this so that's, we'll say, yeah, hard. Just to prove that this is actually logging what we wanted it to there. We will put arg and then we'll print value. There we go. So this thing that we passed it to, the callback, receives the value when we change the value of, change any of these properties on the object. So you can imagine this is kind of how you could do a framework like Vue, right? So you've got your data part of your object, and when any of that bit in the data object changes, it knows to do some DOM manipulation, right? Use a virtual diffing and figure out what changed, and then manipulate the part of the DOM. So this is exactly how it works. There's a lot more around it, but that's how it works. Any questions on observability or proxies in general so far? Does it make sense how that worked?
Can you repeat a bit about the reflect?
Sure. So reflect, this is a little bit strange. Let me rewrite how this could be done. So sets intercepts the target, which was the actual person object. Another way of thinking about it is kind of like the context. It's this. kind of. It's your it's a reference to this. Prop is the actual thing, so it'll be last name here. And then the value is the value that we try to set it as. So another way to do this would be, I'm going to just take target prop equals value. And to prove that that worked, if I then console log, actually, if I log person afterwards, you can see that the last name was actually changed. So I can do that with just the things I was given set. I don't need reflect. Reflect, and truthfully, this is probably the thing I like the least about JavaScript, or one of the weirdisms of JavaScript. Arguments, look at that, it's like, where is that defined? It's not defined anywhere. Any function that you call implicitly has a thing called arguments, which is your arguments. And so the arguments to the set are target prop and value. Let's actually log that out. Let's see, console log arguments. Resolve. Okay, got a lot of stuff. I think so. Let's actually go to this.
Use your custom log function.
I can. They basically do the same. I typically steered clear of reflect. Because I don't really understand it very well myself, but let's take a look. Yeah. So these things, these methods here, apply, construct, define property, delete property, get, all these ones here. If I take a look at, those are all the same names of the things that I can use as methods for the handler for the proxy. So this guy takes reflect.set. It takes object, the property, and the value. So I was expecting to see, when I logged out the arguments, I was expecting to see target prop value. Resolve. Interesting. Not entirely sure why that's not the case. But reflect.set. Oh, okay, interesting. But reflect.set is not actually even working. That might be it. I think you might be right. So what Duraj just pointed out is I'm using a syntax here where the property is set and the value of it is a arrow function. Problem with that is arrow functions don't preserve context. So if I change that to this, okay, there we go. So if I see the arguments, first name, last name is the actual object. Last name is a property, including with value. So the arguments are these three things essentially. Thanks for catching that. It probably would have taken me a lot longer to figure that out. So that's a note on syntax there. There is a shorthand for defining methods on here. You can define a property and then give it a function. I tend to do that, but it doesn't preserve context. Any other questions on or comments on observability? You may be wondering why. I'll explain kind of the syntax of what I did here. I did a function that returns another function that then returns the proxy. So the reason why I did that is I wanted to be able to first call on update on the object, and then after calling that, call it on the callback. I could have just put them in one like this. And then I could pass this. So that works too. I just kind of liked the way that we called it there. Also, because this is in a curly brackets there, and all I'm doing is returning, don't technically need those curlies. Do that too. Works fine. All right, so this is my favorite. This is the one that I've been playing around with quite a bit, and I plan on releasing as an NPM package at some point. It's not done yet. It's probably going to be like 3 times longer than this right now. So personally, I really like chainable APIs in JavaScript when you can call methods and just kind of do dot to this, dot to that, and keep going. But that only works if the object that you're calling dot on has that as a property, as a method. Sorry. There are a few ways to extend your object. You can actually extend the prototype, right? So in JavaScript, it's a prototypal language, which means that there is a object that is used and extended to create other types of objects. And you can set the prototype of your object to any object. The array prototype has certain methods on it, like map and splice and filter and all those things. An actual array doesn't have those methods. It's on the prototype. Right? So I could add things to the prototype. The benefit of doing that is if I were to look at the methods of, if you remember actually when we logged out these I'm not entirely sure why this is the case, but it's interesting that when we logged out, I'll leave that in there. Logged out the get own property names, length was one of them, which tells me that length is actually somehow, maybe it's because they don't want to recompute the length every single time. But length is not a method on the prototype. It's actually a property of an array. But it doesn't have, you can see, it doesn't have things like filter and all that, because when you call array.filter, it looks to see if that object has it first. And if it doesn't, it looks up at the prototype and says, okay, do you have it? So the benefit of adding things to the prototype is you don't have it showing up inside of here, and it's not like cluttering. If you were to add it as an actual method, if you had like 100 arrays, all of them would have a copy of that function. But if it's on the prototype, there's only one copy of that function, one definition, and it takes up just that fixed amount of space. Unfortunately, adding things to the prototype is a bad idea. And it's mostly because other people might do it, but if nobody does it, you could probably do it. So, pros and cons there. The other way to do it was the second one that I just mentioned, just add it directly to the object itself. So if I wanted to have an array and I wanted to add zip width, that helper function that I created, if I wanted to add zip width to my array, I could just take my array and extend it with a wrapper and say, I want to add this. And actually, it's as simple as doing this. I could just say, my original array and then add on my zip width function. Well, not quite, because you would need to make sure that your function takes in the this context, right? So you have to worry about the context as well. So I wanted a way to be able to chain other functions that I didn't have onto the thing that I didn't have. So we'll run through the code for, actually we'll just run it first and show you how it works. On the chain, I've got my helper functions, which I've imported in, and then I give it my array. And the first thing I do is my array is defined up here, 1 through 9. I increment them all by 10. This is using the map method that is on the array. My helpers does not have a map method. It has zip width, log, and shuffle. Then what I do is I log it using my logger. And this is why I need the log rather than the the console log. Then I shuffle it, then I log it again. Then I zip with ABCDE, yep. And the function that I'm using is just a concat, just it takes two elements and together. And then I log it again. So I think this already came out here. So the first thing I did was add a 10 to each. Then I shuffled them around. Then I added ABCDE. And so essentially how this works is we're using a proxy and we're using the get instead of the set now. When I get a thing, which is basically calling dot something on it, I'm checking to see if the target, which is the thing that's the array, I'm checking to see if it has a property and that property is a function. So in other words, is there, when I first called .map, is there a map method on the array? And the answer is yes. So then what I do is I just return I take the map method and I apply it, and then I return it as another function, and I recursively call chainify. If it's not a function, if it's not a method on that data, then I look it up in the functions that was passed in, see is it a function in there, and then I apply it by taking the object itself and passing it as a first argument, and then all the rest of my arguments as the rest of the arguments. So zip with took 3 arguments. It took a first array, a second array, and a function. Shuffle took 1 argument. When I did shuffle here, I didn't pass any arguments because it used the thing that it was passed with dot as the argument. When I called zip with, I only passed it 1 array because again, it used the array that it was given as a first argument. So the autocomplete of these looks a little weird because it thinks that I am missing the third. I'm actually surprised it even knows that there's autocomplete because I'm trying to call a method on a property that doesn't even, exist. So I don't know how it's finding the definition of this. So there's probably some TypeScript stuff that I could do to do this. I'm not very good at TypeScript though. And then log, of course, is just a way of me interjecting. And the reason why I had my own log here is it returns the first item that it was given. Console log will just perform a side effect. This log will perform the side effect and then pass it along. And I need that if I want to be able to change. So that's the reason why I got that there. So I run this. You can see that the second time I ran this, these were shuffled around and it was in a different order there. The neat thing about this is like literally any function array, so long as it's not primitives, right? I can chain things onto it. You could do this with primitives. It's just it gets a little ugly because now if you were to return the last thing and it's an actual primitive, it returns you the object of the primitive. I didn't handle primitives here. Any questions about how this works? Another approach to doing this would have just been to use a, you guys familiar with Ramda or Ramda? You probably heard of low dash or underscore. Ramda is a functional equivalent. So if you're familiar with functional programming, Ramda has something called pipe, which will do more or less this, but it doesn't allow you to use actual methods. Like I didn't have to write my own map because there was already one on the array. I could have written my own, right? So I could write my own that just says const map 2. And it's actually really easy to write your own because all you do is say that, right? You just call the map that you were given. What do you have to do? You have to give it an array, and then you have to give it the stuff that it needs, right? Give the cards. You just say, yeah, cards. And then you just grab the arms. So if I do map 2 there, Okay, that didn't work. What do you do again? Map to take your array, return array dot map. For some reason, I'm blanking on how to do this right now. But the good thing is that you don't have to do that because it's already defined on it. But you can add in any functions that you want to. So I think the nice thing about the Chainable API is it's pretty readable, right? You read things top to bottom, generally. I did have another version of this where are you guys familiar with function composition? It's like you take the output of one function and use it as the input of another function. But generally, when you see things that do function composition, they kind of read right to the left or bottom to top, and it's a little strange. With this syntax, I could actually write it so that I take just the helper function and then I map everything that I want. And then I return that as a return that, and result is actually a function that's reading to the data. And so I could use pipes to, or these chainable APIs to create a new function that I then call later on. So I can use dot notation to compose functions top to bottom instead. So once I actually finish the library and button it up, I'll put it in the JavaScript. Okay. Cool. Any other questions on how this works? See, again, I use that syntax of the dot. This one didn't really matter too much because I didn't need this. And I didn't use reflection or anything like that. But this would work well enough as well. The other thing that I've got here, I just had a helper function for a function. Just checking to see if that is a function. Chainify is in its own internal function. And then the actual chain function is returning chainify of the original object. And that seems a little redundant, but the reason why I did that is when I call chainify again, all I have to do is return the original object instead of having to return the functions and the object. And because functions is inside of this outside function, it's a closure. It has access to the functions already. So there's a lot going on here. It's a closure, it's also a query function, and then it's recursively calling chainify inside of the closure. I'm also using another trick here. You can, cool thing about switch, you can put any expression you want in there and any expression you want in here. So I'm just switching on true. And then I'm using Booleans, predicate functions in the cases. And it finds the first one that's true and then just executes that. So it's, if you have a case where you're doing a whole bunch of if else's and such, this is a hack to get it a little cleaner if you want. Default still works. You don't have to do case true. Default still works. Which I didn't know was the case. For a long time, if you search online and ask about this hack, they'll tell you that it won't, default doesn't work anymore and you have to do case true. But that's not true. Default still works. Oh yeah, that's this last little bit of the default just says if it's not a function on the project, it's not a method on the object, and it's not a function in the functions that I was given, just look for it as a property on the object. So at the very end of this, if I just want this the second to last item here, I can just say, give me the fourth one, and I'll do a log of result. There it is, 14E. Oh, I got that last one. Second element. So there is second element. You can't, of course, chain off of that because now it's a primitive. It's a string. Cool. Any other questions on this one?
It's like this is similar to ROM thing.
Yeah, so,
You consider, is this close enough for you to consider making a PR?
no, it's, I'll show you what is similar in the Ramda to this concept. Ramda provides a whole bunch of like helper. It's like a utility function library, like Lodash or underscore. It provides something called pipe, and pipe allows you to give it a whole bunch of functions. Yeah, so you can say r.pipe, math.power, r.negate, increment, and then return that as a new function. Interesting. I thought this would actually. Instead of saying, take a power of function is take a power, negate it, and increment. So power actually takes 2 arguments, which is why this F takes 2 arguments. Then we negate it, and then increment it. So 3 to the power 4 is 81. So negative 81, and then increment it to 80. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can actually pass first argument in as well. Oops. Okay, so it just takes, this one doesn't work as I expected it to. So this just takes a list of functions and then kind of change them in the order of left to right. So it's kind of a similar concept as well, but it doesn't. If you wanted to have a map, you would have to write your own map. Actually, Ramda comes with a map, so you can just use Ramda's map. There's a lot of other cool stuff in here. One of the coolest ones is probably cond, which is kind of like a switch case where you get an array of arrays where the first item is the subarray is a function that results true or false predicate. And then the second argument is a function that gets called if that first one is true. So it's a kind of a nice way of doing switch or if else. I will note though, both switch and if else are statements. You guys familiar with the difference between a statement and an expression? A statement kind of says do this thing. So console log is a statement. Assignment is a statement. If, switch, while, for, those are all statements. An expression produces a value. So a function is an expression because it will produce a value. A ternary operator, the question mark and the colon, is a expression because it will produce a value. So the neat thing about this is an expression. This thing will always return a value, and then you can get the value back out. In functional programming, you prefer things that are expressions. In fact, most functional languages do not have statements at all. They just don't exist. So if you were to use an if-else, it would actually be an expression. We'll say most functional languages still have assignment, which is still a statement. I talk about functional programming a lot, but JavaScript is actually pretty good at doing functional programming. It's not a functional programming language, but it supports the paradigm pretty nicely. Probably one of the best features about it is this easy way of doing higher order functions. That's just like good support for higher order functions just makes it a lot easier. All right, we covered a lot there. Any questions on what we covered there? There's a lot of concepts. We talked about closures, expressions or statements, recursion. Okay. Last one, I just kind of came up with this one today to try and find another way of using this one. This one uses a new method called apply. And the way that you get a property out of a object is you either call dot on it, right? If it's a method called dot on it, or Or if you want to dynamically call it, you put it in those square brackets, right? But I thought it'd be really cool if you could take an object and use curly brackets to get the value out of it. So you can say apply, and then when I get my target, I apply gets the targets the what does apply take? Let me look it up. Script. Let's see. The target, this arg, and the argument list. Oh, okay. So I could have simplified my code there. This arg. This arg. I'm not sure. Maybe let's just log out what it is. Let's get it. Oh, you know what? I could also just do take a look at what I get here. Oh, okay. There's a reason why it's doing that.
You change 166 underscore.
166 would be underscore. This one right here.
Yeah, you change the idea from underscore to this arg.
Yeah, probably. Probably the case. I don't know why I made it an underscore. I think I
that this arg is just the context.
Oh, I see. Okay, no. That is a little confusing. This underscore is not the same as that underscore. But I actually don't really need this to be called this anymore. Let's turn that off. Oh, okay. It is logging this. Okay, these three things are the things that are being logged. So undefined is this arg. Target is a function, and then this is the arguments that it was given. So this log actually was the thing producing all this stuff. Just didn't recognize it. So apply will then take the arguments. You can pass more than one. Right now I'm only using one here. And what I'm doing is I'm just returning the object property if it exists. I'm looking to see if I can find that property on the object, and if so, just return it. Otherwise, I'm looking to see if that object has a property called underscore. So that's what the underscore was. I'm looking for a property called underscore. And then when I find that property, I'm calling it as a function and passing the function that I was given as an argument. So the cool thing there is, what did I do? I think the token dot. It's prettier to decide to put a semicolon there. I'm defining Fibonacci as the first element being 1, second element being 1, and any other elements being a function that takes the previous 2. So this is the definition of a Fibonacci function as an object. And so if I have my array 1 through 9, I'm just calling map each one on Fibonacci. I'm using my chain guy, so it's kind of like everything put together now. Chain object, Fibonacci and log as my help functions, give it the array, map over each one, call Fibonacci on it, and then log it out. So we have the first 9 Fibonacci numbers. This is not the performant way of doing Fibonacci, because by the time you've called number 9 on it, you're having to recursively go back. So you probably want to do some like memoization on this or something like that. You want to remember that you already computed something and not compute it again. But the really cool thing about that would be it's really easy to do that, because you could just take your object and say, I've already computed the second element. I'm just going to add the second element onto my object now. Let's see if we can do that right now. We have a little bit extra time. So what we'll do is we'll say if okay, I'm going to call the function. Let's use our little switch guy to clean this up a little bit. We'll say if there is a object dot has, I always forget, is object capital O that has property? Let's start object as property. Has own property. Has own property. So has own property. And I want to simply return object case object dot has own property underscore. So in this case, what we want to do is first compute the thing. So we're going to call results as object dot prop, and then we're going to set the new one, set that property to the result that we got. That makes sense? Doing that? Okay. Otherwise, we're just going to, we know that it didn't exist on the object, it didn't exist on the thing, so we'll just return undefined, which is what a normal getter would put, right? So if you had said, I want to get, try that out here. I'm going to log an array. This is a weird syntax. And then I'm going to get the first element of that array. Right? This is not a two-dimensional array. This is me getting the array, and then this is me getting the property 0 on that array. And I believe we should be getting undefined there. All right. So let's see how many times this guy gets called. We'll put a console log in here. And we'll just say, there's no good way of me keeping track of the number of times. So I'm just going to, actually, no, I'm just going to log the prop that I got. Okay, so that didn't work. Why might that have not worked? I'm going to do const test is equal to, and pull this guy out. This is a good, oh no, it's not a good example. Def. The reason why I'm doing that is I'm going to see if def is actually changing. So now I'm going to log def to see if I've added any properties to it. And I have not. So I am not, this bit right here, which is trying to add the property to the object, is not working. It might be because my object, no, it should be the one I passed a call. Any thoughts? What am I missing here?
I run into issues that has on property before it's the object prototype to use it or something.
As an object that has on property.
Yeah. Has it.
X has on property Y. Object of course. Y in X.
That
We could do
first
that.
comment.
That first comment. Object that prototype has on property call. So the property named has on property were not conflicted. Okay. I don't think we're gonna run into that case. But I do like the idea of prop and object. Let's do that. That looks like really nice syntax. So it is still computing the Fibonacci numbers, but it's running more times than I'd like it to. It should really only run. Well, actually, maybe not. We only want it to run the function. How many times? We don't need it to run on the first two, so we only need to run the function 7 times. Let's see how many times we're running inside of the base for its assumption. Oh, okay. No, that's not right. Okay, no. This is the correct place to be logging in because we want to know how many times the function was actually called. It's just, you can see how many times it was logged out here. Log is oh, interesting. Why is that the case? Oh, okay, I see what's going on. When I do this fib call, it is calling the function, which is calling this console up there again. But it doesn't have to recompute it because it hits this one. It finds a property on the object. Okay, let's do object property, and we'll do it's definitely so. The fact that I can see these larger numbers like 34 has a second value to object property, which means that it is being put on the object. Oh, you know what? I called def. There we go. I just logged in the wrong place. So it is working. This is now memoizing on top of calling your function. So this would be a way of like, if you wanted to have a function definition that kept track of the most of the previous calls, you could use this to do that. Sorry, that took a long time. It was literally just this def was put up there and so that it was working correctly. I kind of like this this definition of Fibonacci too, because it's like it's very close to just the definition. Right? It says for the first element, give 1. For the second element, give 1. Anything else, give this definition. So for any other mathematical sort of things where you can come up with a definition like that, you could use this for the base cases for cursive definition for a function too. I just use underscore. Probably not a safe thing to use. There's probably other places where you might have underscore. So a safer thing to use in the future would be a symbol, but that's probably a topic for another time. Ever heard of JavaScript symbols? You heard of them? Okay, yeah, they're guaranteed to be unique. So you could use a symbol here. Cool. That's all I had. Let's take a look at some of the other methods that it supports, just to get an idea of what we got. So we've got apply, which we covered today, get, and set. Covered those three. There's construct. It's a trap for the new operator. So if you're calling new on the thing, you can intercept that. So you can actually make it so that you create an object, you try and create a new one, and then return something else instead. Or I don't know why this would be helpful, when it would be helpful, but if you can think of something, here it is. Define property. Define property. Yep.
Who was the team behind the Proxy project?
What was the?
Who was the team?
Oh,
Some of the folks.
I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what was the reason for it being built.
So you uses it?
Vue uses it. Yeah,
Vue like something proposed?
it could be. I don't really know what it came along with Reflect. And the goal of it is for meta programming in JavaScript. That's kind of what we're doing today, right? We're kind of playing with the syntax a little bit, right? This wouldn't be a normal way of defining a function, but you can kind of mess with it, right?
What ES is this?
ES6. Delete property, get own property descriptor, gets the prototype of. Again, some of these, nobody ever calls get prototype of. This is not type of. Type of will tell you the type of it as a string, and it's hardly ever useful. Well, that's not true. I'm using it myself, but it also often just gives you object, which isn't very helpful.
How do they compare to objects?
Get prototype of? Yeah, this would be like if you were to call array.getPrototype of, or yeah, if you were to call array.getPrototype of, it would actually give objects, because objects are movable. If you were to call an array, an instance of array.getPrototype of, you would then get array. I think it's a string you get back. Let's just run this and see what we get. Oh, okay. No, it's not. It's actually not a string. It's the actual thing. So your monster prototype, it gives you like a reference to that thing. And then it's a referential equality that you're checking. Has, check for the in operator. So that could be helpful. This is just checking to see if the property exists. Is extensible. There is a way to prevent extensions. That's the other one here. I don't actually know what prevent extensions does. It's not the same as object.freeze, so I'm not quite sure. Own keys, intercept for the keys, dot keys on the object. Prevent extensions. So I think get, set, apply, has are probably the big ones. Maybe construct as well. Can you guys think of any other cool uses for this? Some proxies. I think they're really neat. I just came up with this callable one today. I was just trying to come up and invent new ideas of how to use it. So I'm sure if you guys spent a little bit of time like just thinking about how to use this for, you can come up with some neat little things there.
It's very novel. It's out there.
Yeah.
But it's been programmed.
It is been programmed. I think another cool way of doing this, you know how you guys know about the backtick strings. you remember that? There's the way of calling. Yeah, it's called. I guess they're called templating, right? But let's say you had string template literals. That's what it is. Yes. If I'm not mistaken, string template literals, they're actually a function. When you do those backtick things, it calls. So let me actually check that and see. It's just a function that takes my args, and then I'm going to log it up. So if I'm not mistaken, if I call fn and then backtick, and then put some stuff in here, and then I call some other thing in here, let's call, I'm going to put another 2 in here. I got as the args for the function, this calling function with backtick called this function with the args, and the args that I got were the other thing, template literals preserve white space. So if you put tabs on in there, I can literally put tabs in there. Those show up as tabs inside there. That's awesome. For those doing the programming challenges, this is a little hint on how to do that board. Template literals are your friend for that. So you can see that I got first argument was everything here until the first, what would you call it when you put a spot in there? Oh, there's probably a good word for that. But the first time you encounter the $sign correlates, then it breaks that off and puts it over here as the value that was passed in. Then it continues on to the next thing you got, ASDF, then breaks off again and passes 2 as the next argument, and then breaks it off there. So this is how you'll see a lot of DSLs, domain-specific languages that use this syntax, right? GraphQL is one of them. Right? If you guys are using React, what's it called? It's so long since I've used it. The CSS and JS one. Mm-hmm. What's it called? Not the. There's one that's called like Emotion, but the style components. That's what style components. Style components uses this as well. I think it's really neat, but the syntax that you get is like really not JavaScript anymore. I bet you could probably come up with some better DSLs that look like JavaScript a little bit more using proxies. So you could probably come up with a better GraphQL thing that maybe uses chains to write your queries, more like a regular ORM, but for GraphQL. Right? You could probably come up with better style components thing as well that uses that syntax. So
maybe they thought of that for proxy.
They probably did, yeah. CSS style components probably existed well before this was out. I don't know how long they've been out. I haven't touched React in like 5 years, and I had already been using style components like 3 years ago. So probably like 8-9 years ago was style components before this was out. ES6 feels new. It's not that new anymore. I think they already have ES7 out.
It's big.
ECMA Foundation.
No, yeah, it's yearly now.
Oh, that's right. That's true. Yeah, I think that was like the big one. And then I think it's now kind of on a yearly rolling release.
ES6 was like
2013. Okay, so we're coming up on 10 years already. Now I feel cool. It still feels like the newest, coolest thing.
It is cool. Yeah.
It's cool stuff.
I don't think my college professors didn't catch up to ES6. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. This is a weird syntax. I don't know how. I don't like how it breaks that up into. It's like almost out of order. It gives you an array of your strings and then takes everything that was in the curlies and spits them out separate. That's true.
2015 is ES6.
Okay. Cool.
Wasn't that long ago.
Not that long ago. 7 years ago. And that was probably when they released it, and then it took browsers a couple years to implement it. So, yeah. Okay, so we're 5 years ago, roughly. It's still new. We can call it new.
Yeah.
People are still catching up with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you guys are interested, experiment. MDN stocks are probably the best place to learn more information about it. Come up with new ideas on how to use it. If you're interested in helping me work on this chain guy, I'll be pushing the code up sometime soon. If you know any TypeScript, because I don't, TypeScript might make this more palatable for some people.
I was gonna say it's impressive how much you got done without TypeScript. This thing sounds like it could get confusing really fast.
Well, unfortunately, I think it will get more confusing with TypeScript because you're dealing with higher order functions and you have to use generics to say like, this thing is a thing that accepts a function of these types, and I'm going to return a new function that takes those types and reform the types that I got. It'll be a headache. If you guys are familiar with functional programming, generally, when we do piping, so here at the company, we use Elixir as our primary programming language, and then JavaScript as well. Elixir is a functional programming language. I'll give you a little taste of what it looks like. I'll try and pull up a code sample here. Let's see. Move to switch this. I kind of modeled this after Elixir's pipes. Other languages have pipes as well. There's actually a proposal to add pipes into JavaScript. This is their second time attempting. The first time it got knocked down. This time it is stage 2, which is further than they got last time. It's been in stage 2 for like 10 years now. It's not very likely to ever get added to JavaScript.
Aren't there pipes in Node?
Node. What kind of?
I just took a Node assessment the other day, and I had to answer questions about like duplex pipes.
Oh. Okay. Not familiar with that.
You need to use a quick Google search away.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. The pipes that I'm referring to are, you'll see it often written as this, which is actually this character followed by that character. It's just I have a font that kind of converts them together. And so that exact syntax is the one that is proposed for in JavaScript right now. Pipe operator for JavaScript, what it would look like would be being able to pass a bunch of functions into each other. So basically what we just did there, but I did it with the dot, right? This one would just be pipe, pass it to a function. Now, there's actually a whole bunch of, so there's a reference to rom dot as well. There's a whole bunch of arguments around how to do this correctly, because in Elixir, if I pipe it into this function, let me find a function that takes more than one argument if I can. Here we go, enum.at. If I were to type right here, enum.at, you can see it takes an enumeral and then an index and some defaults. But if I were to pipe it from here, let's say enum.at now, it still takes the enumerable first, but it knows that I already have it because the pipe operator gave it to me. Which if I can get TypeScript to work on that stuff, I could probably, tell it, you already have the first argument, tell them to give me the second argument. But the key thing to note is it's passing it as a first argument function. Generally, most functional programming languages, including F# is another one that's just C# alternative. will pass the data as a last argument. And last is in quotes because in most functional programming languages, they are what's called curried. Curried just means, with respect to JavaScript, that we only ever take one argument at a time. So when I say last argument, there really only is one place for it. It just my function is a function that return a function took an argument all the way down to only having one argument, and then I pass that one argument and it cascades all the way back. The cool thing about curried is you get a lot of reusability, right? With this chain guy, I was able to define it with just the functions on it. So I could just say, I want to chain my helpers over here. Chain helpers. And I'm going to call this guy now pipe. And now when I do this part, I can just call pipe with my array. So you get a lot of reusability when you use currying. But with currying, you want to pass it as a last argument. The reason why I didn't do that though is another thing that kind of doesn't work well with that, and that's called variadic functions. Variadic function just means you can pass a variable number of arguments. If you have a function that can take any number of arguments, you can't pipe to the last. Because how do you know when the other arguments have stopped and the last one is the one that you wanted? Right? So you'll see a whole bunch of stuff in this proposal where, because of variadic functions that say, maybe we use ampersand to tell it where to put it, which position in the function to put it. Maybe we always do it in the first, maybe we don't always do it in the last. And so there's debate about how to do that well. So if you're interested, there's also debate about the difference between Hack versus F Sharp's interpretation of it. TC39 has rejected F Sharp pipes multiple times. So this is their like concession proposal. They're like, we like F Sharp pipes, but since the committee doesn't like it, we're going to propose Hack pipes instead. And then this is the nullary operator for the positional place of where we go. I don't think pipes will ever make it. So this is my approach to my workaround. So I think it's cool. Thanks everyone for coming. I hope this was somewhat useful and not just a whole bunch of
It was great.
jargony nonsense.
Well, it's so filled with information. It's hard not to speak with something every time you mention a topic.
Sure. Yeah, I think this is definitely one of the more advanced sort of things, but hopefully covered a lot of other smaller topics along the way. Stop the recording for now.